It was through some of the darkest times of my life when spirit began to make itself known to me through signs and clues from the other side. It helped me understand that I was not alone, that I was connected, and there was more to life than just this experience. I call those magic moments. I'm Christy Simoncelli, and I'll be your host for this podcast, Unreasonable Magic, where I will share some of the most compelling stories that cannot be explained away through logic from my work as a psychic medium, an astrologer, and a human design consultant, working with clients in my own life. Please join me for the magic. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Unreasonable Magic. I am your host, Christy Simoncelli, and today we're going to do something a little bit different for episode 8. I realized recently that whether you've been following my work for years or you just happen to stumble upon this show, maybe someone shared one of these really cool stories with you, you might only know one side of my story. You might know me from my years in public health and cancer research, working in the community, or you might know me as someone who works with charts, stars, and spirit. But you might not know how those two worlds connect. So today, I'm going to share this raw, unpolished story of how someone who has a master's in public health and worked in oncology for years can end up doing this sort of work, and why really logic and magic aren't as far apart as you think they are. So let's dive in. I realize that some of you listening may not know me. You may not have any idea of how or what it is that took me into the world I live in now, which is involving dead people, the stars, and a lot of charts and math. um, because it didn't start out like this. And some of you might know me only through this work, and you have no idea what I did before. And some of you might know me from my work before and have no idea how in the hell it is that I ended up doing what I'm doing now. So I'm not going to bore you with all the gory details, but I want to talk to you just about the evolution of my process, if that makes sense to you. So a long time ago, 2005, 2006, I started working in the space of public health, in oncology specifically. So I worked with groups that were trying to better outcomes for cancer patients, for people who were seeking care for cancer, for people who were not seeking care for cancer, who needed preventive care. And in those cases, I was shocked to learn back then that there were certain groups of people who got sick more frequently from cancer. I was very green. I had no business doing what I was doing other than I had lost my dad to cancer. My mom's mother had died from cancer. I'd seen a lot of cancer loss in my young life. And so I was pretty passionate about it. Back then, my dad had stomach cancer and died in 2001. He went through a lot and he didn't have a really good sense of direction, I would say, in terms of the complicated healthcare system that exists in our world. It's only gotten more complicated since then. And we didn't really know how to help him other than just to support him. He was a white man with health insurance and a caring family and supportive network. So he had all the tools, and still a lot of things were kind of missed along the way. So witnessing that and losing him was difficult. I had young children back then. They are now 25 years old. So this was a long time ago. So in 2005, when the opportunity came to go work for an organization that was helping people either not get cancer or people who had it do better with it, I was on board. I took a pay cut. I didn't care. I was so excited. This is what I wanted to do. So I did that for a year with the first group I worked with. I then quickly was hired by another group, and my role just grew. I was able to learn a ton. I worked directly for the National Cancer Institute at one point. I learned an immense amount from their staff and their support tools and resources. There was people all across the country that we're in part of a network with. It was great. It was thrilling. I learned so much, and I'm so grateful for the experience I had there. Anyway, I did that for a while, went from there to our local cancer center when the government pulled a contract on the project I was working on. And I spent about 10 years working in that role. That was great. Did a ton of interesting work. But it was probably about maybe 7 years into that 10-year stint where a lot of the work that we had done was in cancer prevention research, trying to understand why certain groups get sick more frequently from cancer, why certain groups aren't seeking care, how they might be subject to less quality care. There was a lot that we look at and consider in that world that we did. We did a lot of community work, surveys, meeting with people, building relationships, understanding things. And at about that 7-year mark, I remember I was sitting at a meeting one day and they started talking about an upcoming rabies clinic and how people would be standing in line to get their animals vaccinated for rabies. And wouldn't that be a great time to hit them up for a mammogram or colonoscopy? And I thought, nope, nope, this is wrong. This is not what we're doing. We're not just shooting fish in a barrel. We're not just trying to catch people because they're in a place. We need to understand them. And so part of at that moment, I kind of opened a door for myself into the world of trauma and ACEs. And so if you don't know about that, that's adverse childhood experiences, has a lot to do with poor health outcomes later in life. So if you're subject to a lot of challenges early in life, traumatic events perhaps, or things that are situational like racism and other things that kind of come up for people, certain communities more often than others, you are more likely to have poor health outcomes. Okay. So I understood that. I came to understand that. And then I wanted to learn more about that, integrate it into the work that we were trying to do so that we could reach people where they were at, come at them with a trauma informed lens, ways that could help them, as opposed to just, continuing to poke at easy grabs for screenings. And it didn't fit. I could feel myself sort of outgrowing things back then because the work we had been doing was very strategic. It had aligned goals, grants were funding it, this kind of thing. But I was like, this doesn't fit what I want to do anymore. And I wanted to talk about stress, and I wanted to talk about the impact of a lifelong of stress or situational stress or the things that go along with the world, and look at it through that lens. Why do people get sicker than other people? And a lot of it has to do with how they're treated in the life that they've been given. At the same time, I was going through a lot in my personal life. I've been struggling with my health for years. A lot of autoimmune illness and different things had come to pass for me. And I had since modified my life a lot. I quit drinking. I had to change my diet. But at the same time, I started exploring alternative health methods because the way that I was being cared for was aggressive and it was too much for my sensitive system. And I wasn't having success. And I didn't have success until I finally found alternative energy healers and this kind of thing, which was completely antithetical to my way of thinking. I was like, nope, that's not it. That's not what I want to do. I want to see people with an MD. I don't want to see other people. But after enough pushing and prodding in the same direction, I finally went and I finally started to find some relief. Now, my life is still pretty sheltered. I can't drink and eat a lot of things, but I have learned a lot about myself and stress and how to take better care of myself as a result of that. And granted, that was almost 10 years ago. But in that process, a lot of things started happening for me. So I'm already thinking about what makes people sicker and how can we help them because of a trauma background and things that might contribute to their illness, things like racism and ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And then I start having this spiritual awakening all happening at the same time. So I spoke about this earlier in another episode. This was also my Uranus opposition, which, okay, not to get weird and technical, and I've already looked at the statistics that people drop off when I start using words like Uranus opposition. I won't say it again, but basically what happens in that time of your life is that you start to step into your most authentic self. Your pathway might change a little bit. This is what drives people into my office. They are either separating from their spouse, they're leaving a job, they're going back to school, they're moving across the world. There's something here that is begging to be seen, begging to be born. And so that's what was happening for me. And I think for me, it was a lot of this understanding people. And I think it was understanding spiritual components to our energy. And so then that went off on its own slippery slope. I did a lot of healing. I went to a lot of places. I did a lot of things that I never thought I would do. I got attuned to Reiki. If you don't know, that is energy healing of its own kind. Very common energetic practices, which is done in many hospitals. It's on the VA. A lot of places use this as a complementary tool. And once I got attuned to Reiki, all sorts of things started opening up for me in many ways. I went from one thing to the next, but as I did that, I started to experience spirit people. Did not anticipate them, wasn't planning on them, didn't seek them out. They came to me. One of the very first people that came to me that I did not know. I had had dreams all my life about my family, my dad after he passed. My grandmother had come, my grandfather had come. People came to me in dreams and stuff, but I knew them. So that felt normal-ish, I guess, for me anyway. But back in 2017, my father-in-law came in a dream, and he had been dead since 1980, and so, I knew who he was because 'cause I'd seen his picture a whole bunch of times, but I wasn't anticipating that, and so that because my brain is the way it is, I had to understand it. What do I do with this? He ended up sharing a lot of stories, things that could be validated, my husband and others in the family, things that were so small and so trivial that there's no way I could have ever known them. It's not a story that would have been shared with me. So I was compelled. I just had to understand what was happening. How do I know these things? How are these things coming into my headspace and why? So I started to take some classes with a woman who later became my teacher and some others, and I learned as much as I could. Things just kept happening, and it was like the more I focused on it, the more they came, the more stuff was coming up, and I just didn't know what to do. Shortly thereafter, in 2018, my mother got sick and she later died. I do believe firmly now, in retrospect, that part of this awakening for me was somewhat of prologue to her passing so that I could stay in touch with her in whatever capacity, that I could believe in her existence beyond this life, because I certainly do now, and somehow share these messages with other people. So that was in 2018. She passed. I was in a bad way for a long time, and I ended up leaving the job at the cancer center back in 2019, which in many ways I do regret a little because I loved that work a lot. I still care a lot about cancer and oncology as a field and probably will always have a passion for it. And then I went to work at some other places in the space of public health. At the same time, I started a blog and I was writing about my experiences with spirit. And then the blog evolved eventually into my seeing clients because I had been taking training classes and I spoke about those things. And then after I started seeing clients and the blog grew, I have over 100 articles on my original blog. I then turned it into a Substack and I started writing. I started writing about my mom and her passing and all the things that went along with it. And now I have this podcast. So I just skipped over a lot of details, but that is essentially how I arrived here. And honestly, it wasn't until tonight as I was kind of thinking about how I wanted to broach this episode that I actually thought about the thing that started shifting for me when I started thinking about why are certain people sicker than others in the first place, and really got me looking at the roots of human suffering and vitality and having your energy squashed. And I learned a lot. It changed a lot. I also got certified to teach yoga somewhere in the middle of all of that. I had always been interested in astrology because my mother was an astrologer. I know I mentioned that before as well. In 2018, I also met human design. So all that time, I was focusing on my studies. I was evolving and doing all these things, kind of counter to intuitive to my master's in public health. But I do believe that background helps keep me anchored in having a really grounded approach to the work that I do. I want to be able to help people and I want to give them something to point at and to understand about themselves because I think at the end of the day, we all through life get disconnected from our true essence. And I think that's a huge part of what contributes to illness. And so that's a piece of what I want to do is continue to help people see how magical they are through the means of astrology and human design. When spirit calls, I answer. So if I do have cause to work with people for that, I will help people connect with their loved ones, and I have experienced and witnessed profound healing for people as a result of that. So what do I do now? I don't work in public health anymore, really, which is sad. I do teach a class to some eager students, hopefully they're eager, about health disparities, which is technically the name of the work that I used to do, and I love that. So I'm really glad it helps me keep a foot in the field and it helps me at least share what I know with people. I would love as a course of this podcast to start sharing some I have a really cool story in mind that I want to share with all of you because it has a little bit of an intuitive slant to it, but it also talks about the power of connection and voice and storytelling, which is all the things I love. I do work with clients, not every day because that takes a lot of out of my energy. I'm currently running a cohort of a group of 10 women that I'm calling my summer school students. And we are working on things about growing your intuition. We're talking about human design and astrology. Sometimes spirit pops in, not often, but sometimes it does. We're working on that. And I also see clients. I write a lot, writing a book about my mom and the experience of her passing and all the things that went on in my life around that since then. And yeah, I'm tired a lot because I'm doing a lot of things. And we also have a new puppy in the house. So that's cool. So, how did I name this podcast? I had several names. I was going back and forth. And I went back to my why. And my why is to help people understand that there's more going on here. There's connection beyond the veil, there is more happening. And, magic makes it sound like a magician and bunnies coming out of a hat and stuff, but that's not really it. You know, the mind, the left brain wants logic and details, but the way that our soul speaks and the way that the universe connects with us is more in that miracles and mini magic moments and things that you just can't explain piece. And quite frankly, I think that is also what heals us. Because when I get too far into the weeds of the left brain stuff, I know I need that other stuff to pull me back. That will continue to always be my thing. When I started that blog back in 2020, my intent was to share my magical stories. And if only 5 people read them, that was okay. It's taken me a long time to come out of the spiritual closet, if you will. But I definitely hope that if only one of you hears one of these stories as we move through this podcast and thinks, okay, there's actually something happening here, beautiful. Then I feel like I've survived in some capacity and done a good thing. I've had so many people reach out over the course of time with little bits and blips of things I've shared with them that have made sense to them, that have helped them heal in some small way. So I love all of that, and that's what keeps me happy. So I'm not a total weirdo, folks. I have some basis in fact. I think the more we hang out together, the more I can get you to believe, but I'm not here to make you believe. I'm here to just make you ask questions. And so hopefully you will do that as a result of some of the things that you're listening to here. I will also just say, looking for questions for the sage and the mystic. The response to having Peggy on the podcast has been amazing. Everybody who had a question asked was thrilled with their response. They got something out of it. We're looking for new questions. So if you have a question, I'm going to put it in the show notes where you can link it up to reach us. You can also just send an email to henscrossing@gmail.com. So that's great. We want that. And then also, if you want to hear more of my stories, but you don't actually like to listen to words, you can read the words. I like to read them too. I'm on Substack. You can find me there under Christy Simoncelli. And I have a website, henscrossing.com. You can also find some stuff there. I am so fascinated by the life that I live and the things that I get to do and the experiences that I have. I'm thrilled that you're all here listening to this. I'm so grateful for the friends who are supporting me and coming on and helping me tell stories. One last note, there is still time to sign up for my human design and astrology workshops at Lilydale. Those are Thursday and Friday, July 30th and 31st. You can go to one, you can go to both. The first is Human Design 101, where we'll cover all the basics and magic of human design. And then on Friday, we're going to take and dovetail astrology and human design together. So I'm super excited about that. There is space for you if you're interested. Come back next week. I'm going to do a special episode for sensitive folks like myself, if you are one of them. I'm going to go through charts and show you places where sensitivity lies, because that was always one of the things that drove me when I was first getting interested in this work. I know finding evidence for it can make it feel a little easier. Plus, I'll give you some useful tools to make it make sense. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening and for being here. Please keep looking for magic and keep looking for your own signs from spirit.